Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to our after hours screen talk. Today, we're going to give our spoiler take on Leigh Whannell's Wolfman, specifically exploring the redesign and new portrayal of the Wolfman creature, portrayed by Christopher Abbott, who plays Blake Lovell, the protagonist of the movie. We get a little glimpse into Blake Lovell's family history and backstory. The key scene in the beginning of the movie involves a hunting trip with his dad in the forest. They encounter a mysterious creature. There is a virus being spread through the region's wildlife. It's no surprise that this is one of the infected people. That's the element that Whannell brings to the table, is treating lycanthropy, the werewolf transformation, as an illness, as a virus. It's very much a physical transformation on that level. And in that sense, really opens the door to lean into those grotesque body horror elements.
Well, I think that what stood out to me the most is you can recognize that the look of this werewolf or this wolf man is drawing on the universal monsters tradition of a wolf man that's recognizably humanoid. It's clearly you can't mistake this for anything but a human monster. So it's not like some of the other treatments we get where you see a full-on transformation into a wolf, or the transformation is much more wolf than human. So, for instance, the lycanthropes in the Underworld series, of course, they all walk upright and have human physiognomy, but the faces and the heads are entirely wolf-like. It did really very much look like a reiteration in a lot of ways of the 1941 Wolfman that we got in that Universal monster picture.
Yes, instead of just getting a guy like we did in the 1941 film where you had Lon Chaney Jr. just with prosthetics and a furry face, this werewolf is a grotesque nightmare, a human animal hybrid. I mean, the transformation scenes are full on body horror where you have Blake Lovell losing teeth, sweating profusely, very much referencing David Cronenberg's The Fly, which I think was a reference and inspiration for the treatment of the transformation. But yeah, going through all these grotesque changes, becoming unrecognizable. Blake is gnawing on his arm to fight the agony of the transformation happening to him. And so, yes, it's very much like a physical transformation, but also it's, a descent into madness as well and
Mhm.
self-destruction because he has this whole family history with his dad. And you learn that he was alienated from his father, felt a cold distance from his father that haunts him in the movie and affects his relationship with his wife, Charlotte, and his daughter. They bring in, a psychological component and element to the transformation that, yes, it's a virus, but also it's an externalization of like maybe some inner trauma or turmoil, that the virus is also kind of maybe inherited trauma from his father. In that respect, it's very much following the arc from the 1941 film
Mm,
and
mm, mhm.
other Wolfman movies where you had that father-son dynamic very much at the center of the movie.
Well, and I think it's interesting that that element of the story seems plucked very much from the 2010 remake with Benicio del Toro, where you have Anthony Hopkins as this Oedipal dark father figure. That seems to be the most immediate frame of reference for that narrative, or for this narrative, as opposed to the 1941 film, where you do have a father-son relationship, but you don't really have that overt edible element. The father character in that film is not himself a monstrous figure.
Yeah, yeah. On that level too, the film feels formulaic. It's
Mm,
very
mhm,
predictable in that respect in terms of the plot. For me, there were like no surprises from the very beginning
mhm,
when you learn that
mhm.
his dad goes missing. Yes, he's probably infected and is now a werewolf, so it's following the same arc. But I think that in terms of like the execution, specifically on like the horror elements too, I thought they were very impactful and shocking. I don't know
Mm.
what you found.
you and I will be at cross at the kind of like going in different directions about this one. I thought that the predictability, the formula doesn't bother me at all. I mean, it's the Wolfman. It's like the Dracula story. We all know it, and vampire mythos, right? You think about vampires and all the lore connected with them. It's been changed up a lot of ways. Everyone brings their own spin to it, but at this point, the formula and all its variations are so iterated and reiterated that, regardless of what they throw at you, it's not going to be surprising.
Yeah.
So what it comes down to is how well those elements are executed. And for me, I thought that Whannell, put simply, I think Whannell was trying to do too many different things in this film, and as a result, I don't think that he does any one thing well enough to really hold my interest. Um,
Okay.
so my reaction to this film was very blah. You refer to it as like as a body horror film, and I've read a little bit about other people who've been noticing that element. And of course, Whannell talked about that. But I didn't think that the film really leaned all into the body horror element. And I think the reason that is because, he wanted to do a lot of other things too. He wanted to explore a father-son relationship, family trauma, a declining marriage, the inherited trauma and what that does to this guy's relationship with his daughter. The film was kind of pulled in those two basic directions. On the one hand, wanting to use lycanthropy as a kind of analog to ancestral family trauma and a dysfunctional family dynamic, but then also do a body horror film that focuses on the transformation and explore the idea of lycanthropy as a kind of degenerative illness, like you said. And so that's two basic things. It's possible to do more than one thing in a film, but I felt like the mixing of these elements was it ended up being kind of muddled for me and half baked, so that neither element was fully articulated for me. And I found myself thinking, well, I'd rather just see one or the other. I'd much rather see a much more kind of like generic, formulaic Wolfman, where it's just about him rampaging through the countryside, um, and exploring the elements of the lycanthropy mythos that really interest me. And that's the idea of that it's this sort of forbidden form of predation. It's a kind, it becomes a form of pseudo cannibalism because this thing is still human and yet not, right?
Yeah.
So it's straddling the line between a kind of monstrous preying on the human, but also a human preying on human, which of course is just full on cannibalism. So those elements are really restrained in favor of wanting to tell a family-oriented horror story.
Yeah. I think you really make a good point. With the transformation, I thought there was going to be another phase of it, and then
Mm,
there
hmm
wasn't. And
hmm
they made that design choice to not have him go full creature. You don't have that kind of othering that you get in, for example, David Cronenberg's The Fly. And
mm,
that's the difference between a Cronenberg body horror film and what this film is doing, just as he
mm.
said. Cronenberg really wants to draw out the grotesque spectacle and
Yeah.
really stretch that out and the excess of it. And this one, as you said, is restrained for exactly those reasons. I think it really wants to make the body horror and the transformation very intimate, really display how it impacts the family, his wife and daughter.
That's the weakest element for me. I think the transformation element is much stronger. And I will say one of the things that I thought was just I love these moments in the film and I wanted to see more of this. But as he's changing, he loses the capacity uh for human speech. And we do get several moments where we see the world from his lycanthrope perspective, and it's this like ultraviolet kind of like strange murky world where he's got this night vision. No wonder these things go into the wilderness and start spreading mayhem if this is what the world looks like to them. It's just this sort of like endless nightmare of strangeness where you can't ever find your bearings. You're
Yeah.
just constantly striking out at monsters because everything looks monstrous and threatening.
Well, actually,
Uh,
I thought it looked strangely evocative and beautiful in a way with
sure, sure.
like when he's looking at his family, his wife. they're glowing like spirits. And so the
Mm.
experience wasn't just horrific, it was surreal, but also had a beautiful strangeness to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And again, like I think that and it was so layered for that reason, right? On the one hand, it was nightmarish and strange and uncanny, but then like you also said, it was ethereal and beautiful and kind of alien in this beautiful way. Um, so I wish the film had leaned all in into that component
Yeah.
because I really just I don't find the other element where he's trying to like tell this sort of tragic story of a good man who's destroyed by this illness. I don't find it convincing at all because I don't buy the dynamic or the intimacy between the characters because it just isn't there.
But I did feel myself being somewhat emotionally impacted. I think the last shot of the movie is quite evocative too, where you have Charlotte and her daughter looking out into the woods where Blake died and leaves you with the question, with this haunting visual reflecting this question, is the curse still alive? Will the trauma be passed down to the next generation? You know?
Yeah, and I think that's again one of the reasons I was so frustrated by this film is that there is a lot going on in there that's interesting. Like I think that what's really interesting about the story that Whannell is trying to tell about the dad and the mom and the daughter is that this is a non-traditional family unit. At the beginning of the film, he's between jobs and is a house husband. He's the primary caregiver to their daughter. So it's an inverted structure when you look at it from a traditional standpoint, right? But then, of course, what happens is that becomes like a turning point moment where it's like, well, there's going to be the return of the repressed, right? This sort of like darkness of masculinity is going to have its day, right? Like this guy is not going to stay this tender-hearted, domestic house husband. So it becomes this reflection on like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a father? And are we inevitably haunted by the darkness of our biology, by our testosterone, by the burden of generations and generations of masculinity and male behavior and acculturation um, and that's pretty interesting. And so that final scene at the end was really fascinating for me because you do get this moment where it's like, well, what's out there? But then on the other hand, you also think, oh, for the first time, I can actually just see the rugged, real beauty of this space. But why can I see the beauty? Because it's been shorn of any kind of overt masculine element. We just have Charlotte and Ginger now. And now that it's just them, just this woman and this girl, no longer a threatening dark father figure, now I can kind of see the beauty, right?
Yeah.
So really interesting, but again, just kind of half baked, not really realized. Doesn't really have that strong emotional component. So I mean, for instance, I would compare this film very negatively to a film like Hereditary, which does again deal with family trauma, but just really sells the strange dysfunctional intimacy of this family. These characters feel like they have histories together, and I feel like these characters have lived with each other and really do have this family unit. And I buy all into that. I don't get that here at all, though.
All right, so to wrap up, how would you rate this movie?
And I mean, if I were being charitable, I'd say 2.5 stars, but I'm 2.5 out of 5. I'm saying more like two, though, really, because it was just such a profoundly frustrating experience because there's so many positive kernels in this film. And there really are moments that hit, but I think what misses is much more memorable for me than what actually hits in this film. I thought the acting was wooden. I thought that the dialogue was wooden. Maybe that was intentional, but if you want to make me and if you want to make me invest in a family tragedy and a marriage in decline in crisis. There has to be something there than just this kind of rigid distance. Failing that, the performances at least have to be compelling, and I really didn't find them compelling at all.
Okay, that's fair. I would give this 3 out of 5 stars.
Mm,
I liked it more. I think the horror was more impactful for me.
mm,
I think it was shot very well, and
mm, mm.
the action when it happened was executed well. I didn't hate it. I thought the jump scares when they happened were good, and also the horror and the suspense was pretty decent. Anyway, those are our thoughts on Leigh Whannell's Wolfman. Let us know if you've checked out this movie, what your opinion is. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time here.
We really appreciate the engagement, guys. So any of your comments, negative or positive, are always welcome.
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you.